Hi, my name is Stasos Clark, and I live here in Des Moines, Iowa. But I'm actually from Los Angeles, the Los Angeles, California area, and I lived there from 1994 to 2004, so about 10 years of my life. And I guess I've got some interesting experience with the air quality out there, and most people know that there's kind of a smog problem out there. And actually, in the newspaper every day, we used to have air quality checks, and I'm sure they still do have air quality checks. For the day and what it looks like. And I remember that Los Angeles is kind of surrounded by mountains to some extent, and the air will come off of the ocean and it'll just kind of blow the smog up against the mountains, and so it'll just kind of be trapped over the city, which is a big reason why there's a smog problem there. And what's sweet about LA is you can kind of see the mountains from almost anywhere that you're at if you get a clear look in that direction. Problem is that with the smog that you really can't see them almost any day. Probably about 80% of the time you're really unable to see them. But on the clear days you can see kind of the snow-capped mountains, and it's a sweet view and it's really awesome. But most of the time you can't see it. But I know that the smog plays a huge factor in people's lives out there. My mom, for instance, she had asthma, and on like more extremely smoggy days, it was very difficult for her to be outside, and she didn't even really have that extreme of a case of asthma. And I know a lot of other people that were really heavily affected by the air quality out there. And I mean, those air quality reports in the newspaper that came with the weather actually affected kind of the way that they conducted their day, and it affected what they were able to do that day and what activities they were able to engage in, and things like that. And so it has like a real impact on life out there. It's not just kind of a environmental phenomenon. It's a very real part of what they deal with. And it was something interesting because I was originally born in Cleveland, and having moved out there, it was kind of interesting to observe that. And I think that's something a lot of people don't realize, is just how much that affects everyday life. And the more industrialized of a nation that we become, I think it will affect us more and more in those regards. And air quality is something that, especially in Iowa, we get to kind of take for granted with all the trees and everything, and the clean air that we get to breathe. But you can see the difference just as you even fly over it, or as you drive through. You can see the difference, and you can feel the difference in the air that you breathe.